Hey guys, so I'm back working on the K series today. So let's get into this. I used a chisel to get this bolt off and did some more research, and I'm not going to be using this old oil pump time and chain guide. So that's coming off, and then I noticed this water pump is leaking here, so I think I'm going to take this off and see where it's leaking from and maybe replace some seals there. But yeah, so that's what I'm going to do today, and then I'm going to wait for some parts, and then I'll be back in a little bit. So looking at this, it looks like this water pump is leaking from the gasket area, which is common on these, or possibly this bolt right here. So I'm just gonna make sure to take this out, and when I put it back in with some Honda Bond, as well as, replace the gasket under here. So let's get this off. It looks like it's just a couple 10s or 12s here, and yeah. Okay, so all these bolts are the same length, so don't worry about mixing them up. All right, so here comes the water pump. Boom. And here's the gasket that I'm going to replace. As far as the blades and stuff, it actually looks good. It still turns really nice, so I'm going to reuse the water pump itself and just try to replace the gasket. All right, guys, so now I got this engine completely apart, ready to go back together. Just waiting on parts now, so I'll see you guys in about a week or two when these parts come. See ya. All right, guys, so it's been a little while, and I got some parts. So, got this clutch. This is a lightweight flywheel from Action Clutch. It's about 10 pounds, half the weight of stock. We have a ACT clutch that should be able to hold 370 pound-feet of torque. And then got some Honda Bond here for the timing cover and the oil pan. I just got two because I didn't know how much I was going to need. Valve cover washer because I was missing one. Valve cover gasket. Oh, so let's get some part numbers here too. Here you go. This is the RSX Type S water pump gasket, which I'm going to have to modify, but it was cheap, so I'm just going to cut off these two little pieces, and it'll work on my water pump. We have two of these bolts because they like to strip for the timing chain guides. Here's the oil pump tensioner. There we go. Here is the oil pump guide. And these are all OEM Honda parts. The oil pump chain. And another bolt. But yeah, so let's go get all these parts installed. And then the motor's done, other than a couple little things. Throttle body. The power steering AC delete kit. A header. I'm an alternator, a belt, and then I'll basically be done my motor at that point. But so yeah, let's get these installed. Some other things I forgot here. I did get some Iridium NGK spark plugs, as well as these are not ARP. I forget the brand. I think it's I forget, but they were like $70 or something. But these are flywheel and pressure plate bolts, because you need shorter flywheel bolts if your motor came off an automatic car. Okay, so starting with this water pump gasket, like I said, as you can see, that's going to fit. I just need to cut off this piece. Not really worried about it because this was $8, and they didn't have my gasket on K-Series parts. So just going to, cut this and get it installed. All right, so I used a pick to get this thing out. Gonna just blow this out with some air and some brake clean, and then this is going in. All right, new gasket is in, so let's get these bolts back in, and they all get torqued to 9 foot-pounds, and then I'll update you guys. Also, I'm gonna quickly clean up this surface a little bit, some brake clean and a paper towel. All right, all the bolts are tightened down, and the water pump's back on. Let's move on to the oil pump installation. Okay, so now let's get this oil pump on. So in my last video, I was a little confused on the timing, the oil pump chain guide. You do need the RSX Type S chain guide for this oil pump, as well as the chain. So you cannot reuse them. You do have to get new ones if you're using any K series that had the balance shaft oil pump. So just keep that in mind when you're building. So yeah, let's get this thing on. So here's what the different guides look like. Obviously the new one is a little shorter, and this one's a little bent up from me trying to get that bolt out that was stripped. But you can see this one's a lot more straight and longer. This is a little shorter, and it's got a little curve to it. So that just shows you the difference between the two. All right, guys, so I ran into a little bit of a problem. I ordered the wrong chain guide bolts. These are actually for the timing chain guide, not the oil pump guide. So that's gonna push this video back a little bit, but I'm still gonna get the pump on and the baffle and some other things, so we'll at least do what we can here. Okay, so the oil pump just kind of presses down into these holes, just kind of wiggle it a little bit, and should plop right down like that. And then the torque spec for these two big bolts on the front is 16 foot-pounds, and then there's a bolt back here. This one is 9 foot-pounds, and the oil pump is on at that point. Okay, so the easiest way to get this on is to just slide this gear off and the oil pump, kind of hold that, and then like slide them both on at the same time, and then just spin it until this gear locks into place. All right, so I'm gonna have to find a bolt for this hole because there wasn't one in any of the bags that I had. I got my new timing chain tensioner on. This is what it should look like. And then when you're ready to actually put tension on it, you just pull this thing off and this pops forward. I'm gonna have to wait on these to torque them down. These are torqued down to 9 foot-pounds, as well as these. Let's see what else. So yeah, now that that's on, let's do the baffle. So the windage tray baffle thing. So firstly, before you do that, this is very important because otherwise you will not have oil pressure. You need to take this plug out, and this should be threaded, and you need to put a bolt in there to block that so that you can keep oil pressure. Otherwise your oil is just going to come out of here, and that's not good. So find a bolt for this. I think it's like the same size as the tensioner bolts, but I'm not 100%. I'll do that and get back to you guys. All right, so it was a pain in the ass, but we used a fine wood screw and some pliers to just pry this plug out. If it's spinning on you, what I did is I took a chisel and tapped it in, put a little notch in it so I could hold a screwdriver on it to keep it from spinning, and then this was able to thread right in. So now we need to find a bolt for this hole right here. Just something to keep in mind, maybe do some of these hand tight. This bolt right here I was just putting in, and I felt it kind of loosen up and basically feel like it stripped out. Maybe I didn't have enough threads on it or something, because this was a bolt I had to find and not an OEM bolt. So just be careful when you're tightening things, as far as like some of these bolts feel like they are very delicate, and maybe 9 foot-pounds is almost a little too much for them for some of these 10 mils. This oil pump bolt, I did fuck up the threads in here, so I had to find a slightly longer bolt and put that in there and then fish out the bad threads. But, you know, obviously the block's aluminum, so I would recommend hand tight instead of 9 foot-pounds with a small ratchet and not a torque wrench. But yeah, just hand tight on these. And then the bigger bolts, those are okay to, you know, to torque to spec. The water pump was okay too. But at least for the rest of the bolts on here, like this windage tray and stuff, definitely just do hand tight. Okay guys, so I got the correct bolts for the oil chain guide, and here's the part number if you're interested. Then also I got this for the oil passage. So let's get these in, and yeah. Also for this bolt, you want to use some Honda Bond or some type of gasket maker on here to keep the oil from leaking out. So just put some type of sealant on that bolt. Okay, so now that that is done and cranked down by hand, next is our windage tray. By the way, for this bolt, it was a 1.5" Honda 12mm head, M10, I believe. So just if you're trying to find the bolt, that's what I used, was about an inch and a half M10. All right, so here's what the windage tray looks like. Bolted down, crank down by hand, looking good. And for those that don't know, what a windage tray does is it essentially keeps your oil from sloshing up into your pistons under hard driving. So it stays down here where the pickup is. And there are different oil pans and oil pan baffles that will help with this even more. But for my purposes, this stock one from the Type S is good. All right, so now it's time to put our timing chain back on, as well as the tensioner and the guide. Now, this is very crucial because these engines are interference engines, meaning if your timing is off, your valve can hit your piston and you'll bend your valves and fuck up your motor, have to take it out, completely rebuild it. So I found the chain links that I marked. One's here and one's here. And this did rotate a little bit, as you can see, when I put on this new timing chain gear. Or cam gear. So I have my marks to make sure. And then also I have these marks in the center should be lined up. So I'm just going to rotate this cam back a little bit to where it should be. And that will be my timing. Okay, so I'm actually going to put on this chain tensioner before I finish putting the timing chain on, because otherwise it won't hold with pressure on the cams from it trying to rotate. But all you need to do for this is hold this back, push this in, and then you put a little pin in here to hold it, and then you're good to put it on. So something I just now learned as I'm going to put back on my timing belt is the back of the cams actually have little holes in them that you can stick drill bits in to hold them at top dead center, which is really nice. Wish I would have known that, but as you can see, now these dashes are perfectly lined up. Something else to note with this 50-degree VTC is that this dot will be off a little bit to the side. So, all right, guys, so I actually decided I'm going to get a new tensioner and chain. So, going to be back in about a week, and we'll get back on it. Okay, so I got a new timing tensioner and chain. Here's the part numbers for the chain, for the tensioner. And I'm just going to soak this tensioner in oil for about an hour before I install it. That way, you know, it's nice and lubed up for the first start of the engine and everything. But because these guys work on oil pressure, so yeah. Okay, so while I was waiting for this to soak, I took a knife and I tried to clean up this gasket surface on this oil pan as best as I could. I'm not sure if I'm too happy with it. I might take a wire wheel to it or something, but just lightly to get it a little more cleaned up. But It's looking all right for now. Yeah, honestly, I should have just started with the wire wheel because that's way better. This stuff is just on the outside edge. That doesn't really matter, but see how the surface is clean. But so yeah, now I gotta wipe this out, make sure it's all clean, and then I'll get the timing chain and tensioner on. Okay, so I have my sister put a little bit of tension on this cam with the wrench. I took off this top piece here also to make it easier, but basically to start, I went around the bottom here. You put this gold link on the dot here, and then I looped it up here. I had 2 of these bolts out, so this was swinging. Put it up here. This dot goes between these 2 gold links. This dot goes between these 2 gold links. And then, so I just held these together while I put in the bolts by hand. And then, yeah, so now I'm just gonna tighten them down, pull out the pins on the timing chain and oil pump tensioner, and that's that step done. And now I can see that this tensioner is in spec, as this is much less than 13 millimeters out, or 14, I forget what the spec was, but I think that's about, looking at it, it's probably about 6, 7, maybe 8 millimeters out, but a lot less than, you know, it's in spec, so this timing chain is not stretched out or anything. It's nice and fresh, and that's not gonna fail on me at all. When you put these cam journal bolts back in, the torque spec is 30 foot-pounds, so I'm gonna do that. Well, 29, but I'll do 30 foot-pounds. Also, another thing I forgot for the timing, definitely want to rotate the crank a couple times. I forget if it's 2 or 4. I think it's 4. Don't quote me on that. But after a couple times, everything should line back up on the gears. The links are going to change, obviously, but as far as like the marks on the gears and stuff like that, and the crank down here, that should all line back up again after a couple turns. Okay, so I just rotated it both, well, I rotated it 2 times, checked it, rotated it 4 times, checked it, and both at 2 and 4 times of rotation, it was good and lined up. So that tells me that I set everything properly. So now I can get the timing cover back on and get this thing back together. All right, so I cleaned up the surfaces of these, and then this was sitting a while, so I'm gonna wipe this out a little more, but basically clean up the surface with a wire wheel on all of these chrome surfaces here. Same thing with the motor, not with the wire wheel, but brake clean, wipe them down, you know, make sure that they're all clean before you seal them. But we're gonna put Honda Bond on this next, and I'll show you how to do that. One more thing before you put the timing cover on, make sure you get this little sensor on. Outside, goes outside. So as per the instructions on here, I'm just going to use a glove. Just wipe this on here nice and thin. And then put it on, tighten down the timing cover, and that's that. All right, so here's what it's looking like. As per the directions, this is going to sit for a couple minutes here, like 1 or 2 minutes. Then it's just going to go on the engine. Okay, so now that the timing cover's back in, we can get this filter thingy back in. Put it right in there. And that's about it for the timing cover. Now this Honda Bond is going to take, I believe it says up to 3 days, something like that, to fully cure. So, you know, when you do the oil fill or the oil pan and stuff like that, I probably wouldn't put oil in the engine for a couple days. So that way it has a chance to fully cure and it's not going to develop any leaks before you even put it into the car. All right, guys. So now that the timing chain or the timing cover's on, time to do the same thing with this oil pan. Same procedure with the Honda Bond. Once again, it does say 7 foot-pounds. I'm just going to do them by hand because it seemed like that wasn't super accurate. But yeah, so let's get this oil pan on. Another note here, I only needed 1 tube of Honda Bond, and I still have probably half this tube left for the whole engine. So, you know, if you're doing this yourself, I ordered 2 tubes, but you really only probably need 1. So, yeah. All right, so once again, I cleaned up this gasket surface. I cleaned up this valve cover a little bit. got some of the carbon off this area. Put in a new valve cover gasket. So let's get this valve cover back on. All right, so I tapped the valve cover on with a rubber mallet, as well as these little washers here. Tighten them down. Now let's put in the new spark plugs I got, as well as the coils. Here's the spark plugs I got. They are NGK Iridiums. And yeah, so these will fit in here. All right, so coils and plugs are in. I did just notice I am going to need a new, missing a bolt here, but I'm going to need a new coil harness, I guess, something, because this is all cut. So this is going to have to come back off, and I'm going to have to do that at some point. But I just wanted to get the motor back together today, and then obviously it still has some other little things that it needs, but next is the balancer. Okay, so for this crank pulley balancer thing, torque spec is 181 foot-pounds, so gonna do that. So my largest half-inch drive torque wrench only goes up to 150 pounds. So honestly, I'm just gonna drive this thing home with a fucking, air gun and call it a day in a weighted socket. So yeah. So the last thing that I'm gonna do on this motor before I call it quits on this at least and start focusing on putting the LSD in the transmission is putting on the flywheel. So flywheel is going to be 118 foot-pounds of torque in a star pattern. And if you had an automatic engine like this one was, you're going to need to change out these bolts. The manual ones are a different length. So let's go get the flywheel. So here is my beautiful action clutch lightweight flywheel. This is one of the parts that I decided to spend a little more money on and get something really nice for this. What this is going to do is it's going to help the car rev up faster, less rotating mass. So yeah, this is about half the weight of a stock one. So this one's about 10 pounds. Stock is about 20. So yeah, this is going to help squeeze a little more power out of this engine, help it rev a little faster, and yeah. And then here we have the flywheel bolts for the manual ones and some ARP assembly lube, which is important to use on these when you're doing this, because otherwise the torque spec, your torque wrench won't be accurate. All right, guys, so I don't have the socket for my torque wrench for this flywheel, the 12 point, I believe 17 for the half-inch drive. So I'm just going to leave this here. Call this quits for the motor, at least as far as this goes. Until further notice, I still need to get like a AC power steering delete kit and alternator relocation bracket. Some other things here and there. Like I said, this wiring harness for the coils. Gotta, clean up back here, see what's going on with all this piping and stuff. So, but yeah, so for right now, I'm just gonna call it done here for this series on the engine at least. And next video that comes out, we'll be working on the transmission to get a limited slip differential in there. So that's gonna be cool. All right, well, thank you. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and sub if you want to follow the build. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.